I wasn't supposed to come back. The cab was already waiting by the curb, engine humming like it couldn't wait to take me away. But as I reached into my handbag, my heart sank. My passport wasn't there. With trembling hands and a quiet apology to the driver, I turned back toward the house, thinking only of the drawer by the bedside table. The front door creaked open. I didn't call out. That's the strange thing about growing old. You begin to feel invisible, and sometimes you use that to your advantage. My daughter, Alice, didn't hear me step inside. Her voice came sharp and low from the kitchen, filtered through the half-open door like smoke. I don't care how we do it, she was saying. I'm not letting her waste another dime. Once she's out of the way, the house is ours. She doesn't even need to know. A man's voice responded. Calm. Cold. Are you sure she doesn't suspect anything? She's old, Alice scoffed. She thinks I'm still her little girl. My legs buckled. I pressed myself to the wall, breath trapped in my throat. The hallway was dim, shadows stretching from family photos that suddenly seemed to mock me. I had lived in that house for 47 years. I gave birth to Alice in the master bedroom. I sang her to sleep in the nursery. And now, she was planning to take it all from me. No, planning worse. They were plotting to remove me from the picture. Not just from the house, from their lives. I'll say she's confused, Alice continued. The doctor already hinted at early dementia. All I have to do is push a little harder. No court will question me if I say she's a danger to herself. The man laughed. It wasn't the laugh that frightened me, it was the fact that Alice didn't flinch at it. I backed away from the door, careful not to let the floorboards groan. My mind raced. My passport. The cab. My trip to visit my sister in Oregon, a trip Alice had pushed me to take. Now I saw why. She needed time. Time to fabricate whatever tale she was going to spin in my absence. But I was no fool. I hadn't raised her to be like this. I hadn't grown old without learning how to survive. I left the house silently, heart hammering in my chest. I told the cab driver to wait a minute longer while I fetched a glass of water inside. He smiled. I smiled back, pretending. Once we were on the road, I didn't say a word. At the airport, I found a corner seat and just sat. I didn't board the flight. Instead, I thought. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't cry. The next morning, I returned home. Alice wasn't expecting me. Her eyes widened when she opened the door. Mom, she blinked. I thought your flight. I missed it, I said plainly. Where's Mark? She stiffened. Who? The man you were whispering to in the kitchen. Yesterday. Her mouth opened. Closed. You don't know what you're talking about. I do, I said. She stepped aside, reluctantly. I walked past her, straight into my home. I could feel the tension trailing behind me like a second shadow. The air smelled different, not of cookies and lavender like when I kept the place, but bleach and anxiety. You've been talking to someone, I said, not turning to look at her. Someone who said I wasn't fit to live here. Someone who promised you this house. She didn't deny it. Instead, she said, You don't understand, Mom. You've been forgetting things. You left the stove on last week. The fire department. It was the kettle, I interrupted. And I turned it off before it boiled. You know that. She shifted on her feet. Alice, I said, finally looking her in the eye. Do you want me gone? Her lips quivered. And then, in a whisper I wasn't meant to hear, she said, I just want my life back. That cut deeper than any knife. Her life. As if I had taken something from her. As if I hadn't worked 2 jobs after her father died, sacrificed my own dreams so she could go to college, paid off the mortgage alone. You want your life back? I echoed. By throwing me away? You make it sound cruel, she said, arms crossing. I'm doing what's best. For both of us. My fingers curled into fists. No, I said. You're doing what's convenient. There's a difference. She turned her back on me. You should have just taken the trip. I stood in the silence she left behind. Then I walked into my room and picked up the phone. There were people I hadn't talked to in years. My friend Margaret, the lawyer who helped with Dad's will, the neighbor with the security camera out front. I had no intention of disappearing quietly. The days that followed were a blur of documents and decisions. I transferred the house into a living trust, with conditions Alice didn't know about. I wrote a statement, dated and signed, describing what I'd overheard. I gathered letters from friends attesting to my mental sharpness. I recorded my conversations with Alice calmly, discreetly. And then, I waited. One evening, as the sky turned orange outside, Alice stepped into the living room. She had that same mask on, the polite smile, the concerned eyes. "Mom, I've been thinking," she said. "Maybe it's time we looked into assisted living options. Somewhere peaceful, where you'd have help, where you could sell the house." She paused. I pointed to the coffee table. "There's a folder there. You might want to read it." Her brows furrowed as she picked it up, flipping through pages of notarized paperwork, recordings, witness letters, and the name of my lawyer. "I know what you've been planning," I said gently, "and I want you to stop." She sat down slowly, hands trembling. "You think I'm a monster. I think you're scared," I said. "But fear doesn't justify betrayal." Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't mean to go that far. I just felt stuck. I didn't know how to ask for help." I looked at her, really looked at her. The daughter I raised. The woman shaped by grief, pressure, and unspoken pain. "You could have asked," I whispered. "I would have given anything." She nodded, tears spilling. "I'm sorry. Sorry didn't undo what she'd done. But it was a start. A fragile one." And for the first time in a long time, I saw not the stranger who plotted behind my back, but the girl who once held my hand when she was scared of thunder. And I held her hand now, unsure of the road ahead, but knowing I wouldn't walk it blind again. Alice began to avoid me after that evening. She moved around the house like a shadow, slipping past me without words, her footsteps soft but heavy with guilt. I didn't push her. There was a storm between us still, but forcing the rain to fall never made it stop sooner. I gave her space and kept watching. Old habits die hard. I had spent years anticipating her needs, warming up soup when she was sick, staying up until she came home from parties, pretending not to see the tears she tried to hide after her divorce. Now I was anticipating something else, the next move. I didn't trust her. Not yet. Not while I still remembered the chill in her voice that day in the kitchen. That wasn't the voice of someone merely desperate. It was the voice of someone convinced that I was in the way. And I still didn't know who the man was. That stranger. His voice haunted me. Smooth. Confident. A voice that belonged to someone used to manipulation. Not a friend. Not someone who had my daughter's best interests at heart, not truly. But someone who knew how to pull the strings of the vulnerable. Alice had never been strong-willed. She had always followed. When she was young, it was the popular girls. Then, it was her husband, the one who left when things got hard. And I had to find him. I waited until Alice left the house one afternoon. She said she was going to the grocery store, but her purse was too light for that, and she'd taken the black folder with her, the one she kept hidden under her bed. I watched her car disappear down the road before moving quickly into her room. It was still tidy, pristine, as if no one lived there. But the nightstand held the clues. Her phone. Unlocked. She never expected me to be able to work a smartphone. That was her mistake. I opened her messages. And there it was. His name was Bryce. Their exchange was recent. Not just before my missed flight, but ongoing. Bryce, has she signed anything yet? Alice, no. But I think I can get her to by next week. Bryce, use the medical angle. That always works. Confusion, forgetfulness, stress. Make it look like it's for her own good. Alice, she's being more alert lately. Suspicious. Bryce, then distract her. Make her feel safe. And when the time comes, have the papers ready. My hands trembled. Not with fear, but fury. So this was still happening. Even after our conversation. Even after the tears. Alice wasn't done. Or maybe she was caught in something deeper than I realized. Maybe Bryce had something on her, or maybe she didn't see a way out. But I did. And I wasn't going to let this go further. I took screenshots of the messages and emailed them to myself. Then I placed her phone exactly where it had been. And I began my plan. The next day, I made an appointment with a private investigator. His name was George, a retired police officer, grizzled but kind, with eyes that didn't miss details. I showed him the messages. I told him everything, the kitchen conversation, the avoidance, the pressure. He listened carefully. "Do you believe your daughter is capable of going through with it?" he asked. "I believe she's being manipulated," I replied. "But that doesn't excuse it." He nodded. "I'll look into Bryce. If he's got a record, or if he's done this before, we'll know soon." And by the end of the week, we did. Bryce Langley, age 45, former financial advisor, lost his license due to fraud. Sued by two elderly women in the past, both cases settled privately. One of the women died before court proceedings finished. Cause of death, complications from a fall. George looked me in the eye. "This guy is a predator. He targets older women with property and money, befriends or manipulates a family member, creates tension, and then finds a way to gain control over assets. I sat back in my chair, the breath knocked from me. He's done this before? At least twice. Probably more. And now, I whispered, he's using my daughter. George nodded grimly. And your daughter thinks she's in control. I didn't confront Alice. Not yet. Instead, I invited her to lunch. She hesitated, surprised by the offer, but agreed. We went to a little cafe on the edge of town, the kind we used to visit when she was in high school. The same wooden tables. The same blue checkered napkins. I saw a flicker of something in her face when we sat down. Nostalgia. Regret. Maybe both. I've been thinking, I said after our food arrived, about what you said. About assisted living. She looked up, startled. I don't want you to think I dismissed it. I continued calmly. You're right. I've had some lapses. Maybe it is time to plan for the future. Relief washed over her. She tried to hide it, but it was there. Really? She asked. Yes, I said. In fact, I spoke to a lawyer. He's helping me put together a medical power of attorney. I'm going to name someone I trust, just in case. Her smile froze. Oh, yes, I said, sipping my tea. And I've started recording my thoughts each day. To document my clarity, so no one can say I'm confused or forgetful. She set down her fork. And I've updated my will, I added, to include all the new developments. Her throat bobbed. She looked like a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar. But she said nothing. When we left the cafe, I gave her a hug. Tight. Long. Because I didn't know what was going to happen next. But I knew I'd be ready. George continued digging. He found surveillance footage of Bryce meeting Alice at a hotel 3 towns over. Meetings that occurred regularly. He tracked Bryce's current residence, a rental under a fake name. And more importantly, he learned Bryce had been pushing Alice to apply for guardianship of me, using a private evaluator they both had ties to. The plan was already in motion. But I had one final move to make. I invited both of them to dinner. Alice hesitated at first, but I told her I wanted to talk things out. To start over. She agreed. Bryce, she said, would just be dropping by for a quick hello. I smiled. Of course. What she didn't know was that George would be parked across the street, and I had hidden 3 audio recorders around the house and 1 camera. That night, I made my mother's famous roast chicken, set the table with the china, lit candles, made it all feel warm. Safe. Bryce arrived late. Smooth smile. Buttoned shirt. Cold eyes. A pleasure to meet you, he said, kissing my hand. I kept my face neutral. Likewise. We sat, ate, chatted. Then I brought up the topic. I said, looking between them, I've been thinking about legacy. About who I can really trust when I'm gone. Bryce leaned in, voice honey slick. You can trust your daughter. She only wants what's best. Of course, I nodded. But it's strange. I feel like someone's been trying to push me. To sign things. To leave too soon. Alice froze. Bryce chuckled. You're just being cautious. Nothing wrong with that. No, I said, voice firm. But there's something very wrong with using someone's fear to steal from them. Silence. Bryce's smile faded. Alice stood up. Mom, maybe we should. I raised a hand. And that's when George knocked on the door. He entered with confidence, holding a folder thick with documents. Evening, he said. Hope I'm not interrupting. Bryce rose. Who are you? Private investigator, George said. And I've got a file with your name all over it. Fraud. Elder abuse. 2 former victims. And a very clear trail right to this house. Alice's mouth opened, but no sound came out. George set the folder down on the table, then looked at me. Want to tell them the rest? He asked. I nodded. I've recorded everything. Every conversation. Every text. Every moment of manipulation. The authorities have it all. I gave them copies this morning. Bryce stepped back, eyes darting to the door. But George blocked the way. You might want to sit down, George said. This time, you won't be walking away. Bryce turned to Alice. You told her? Alice looked down. Ashamed. Broken. No, she whispered. She found out herself. Alice stood frozen. Her hands trembled by her sides, her knuckles pale. The room was painfully quiet except for the ticking of the old kitchen clock, the same one that had marked every birthday, every burnt Thanksgiving pie, every night waiting up for her as a teenager. Now it ticked over this moment, the shattering of what little trust remained. I didn't mean for it to go this far, Alice finally said, her voice cracking like glass underfoot. I thought he was helping. At first. You knew exactly what you were doing, George said flatly. This wasn't some impulsive mistake, Alice. This was premeditated and criminal. She turned to me, her eyes glistening. Mom, I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't. I just felt like I was drowning. The house, the bills, my life, it's all falling apart. And he promised it would be easy. Easy? I echoed, stunned. Easy to strip away my autonomy? Easy to claim I was mentally gone? Easy to throw your own mother in some care facility while you signed papers behind my back? Her lips quivered. I was scared. I shook my head, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. So was I, Alice. You think it's easy growing old? Watching the people you love drift away? I trusted you. I trusted you with everything. And you handed me over to a predator. Bryce, still sitting stiffly, tried to regain control. This is nothing but drama. No one's filed anything. We can all walk away and pretend this didn't happen. George raised an eyebrow. You think this is over? I haven't broken any laws, Bryce sneered. You've got texts, conversations, but no signatures, no actual crime. I leaned across the table. No crime? You conspired with my daughter to manipulate a vulnerable person. You coached her on how to paint me as mentally unfit. You encouraged forgery, abuse, and isolation. You took careful, documented steps to dismantle my life. And you did it believing I wouldn't notice. That I was too old, too tired, too forgotten to fight back. He said nothing. You're right, I said. Nothing's been signed. Yet. But everything's been recorded. And the police already have enough to build a case. I turned to Alice. Do you want to be on his side when that happens? Or mine? Alice broke down that night. She sat at the kitchen table long after George left, her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking. I watched her silently, unsure if what I felt was anger or sorrow or some terrible blend of both. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I don't know who I am anymore. You're still my daughter, I said softly. But I don't know if I can ever trust you again. She looked up, mascara streaked, eyes red. I'll do anything. I'll go to the police myself. I'll testify. I'll help put him away. And after that, I asked, what happens when the case is over? Do we pretend this didn't happen? No, she said. We face it. Every day. Until I earn my way back. I didn't respond. I didn't know how. But I didn't walk away. 2 weeks later, Bryce was arrested. The charges included conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted elder abuse, and obstruction. His past victims came forward once George helped track them down. Alice, to her credit, handed over her phone, emails, and gave a full statement. She didn't ask for leniency. She didn't run. She faced the truth. So did I. For the first time in my life, I hired a financial advisor of my own, one I vetted carefully, someone independent from family. I revised my estate plans again. I documented everything. I also signed up for a weekly community support group for seniors, not because I was weak, but because I knew how strong you had to be just to say, I need to talk. Alice stayed in the house, but on my terms. She helped around the home. She got a part-time job. She started therapy. At first, our conversations were stiff, clumsy things, full of pauses and sidelong glances. But little by little, they softened. Like old soil, being turned back to life. One night, months later, we sat on the porch. The stars blinked above us, and the garden I used to keep neat had started to bloom again, not perfect, but real. I miss Dad, she said suddenly. I nodded. Me too. I think, she said, that's where it all started for me. The fear. The feeling that everything was slipping away. That no one was looking after me anymore. I always was, I whispered. Even when you stopped seeing it. She reached out and took my hand. It was hesitant, unsure, but it was hers. I want to rebuild this, she said. Then start with today, I replied. And mean it. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe there will always be a crack in the trust between us. A scar that marks the betrayal but reminds us of the healing too. But I do know this. I'm no longer invisible. I am not weak. And I am not done living. The day I returned for my passport, I thought I'd forgotten something. Now I know I found something far more important. The truth. And my voice. The following weeks passed slowly, like watching paint dry on a wall you're no longer sure you want to keep. Alice tried. I could see it in the way she hovered by the stove when I cooked, offering to chop onions or stir the pot, even when I'd already done it. She started asking how my day was, small talk that once would have felt meaningless, but now felt like trying to glue back pieces of a shattered plate. I let her try, but I also protected myself. I moved my personal documents to a safety deposit box. I asked my lawyer to notify me before approving any changes to my living trust, no matter how small. I enrolled in online courses on digital safety and elder fraud, things I never thought I'd need in my 70s. But I was tired of being vulnerable. One afternoon, as I sat in the sunroom sipping my tea, I received a letter, not email, not a typed-up form, but an actual handwritten letter with careful cursive. It was from Evelyn, one of the women George had found, one of Bryce's earlier victims. She had moved in with her niece in Michigan and was recovering, emotionally more than physically. "I'm glad you fought," she wrote. "I didn't have the strength then. But seeing someone else stand up, it gives me hope that we're not just fading away, that we still matter." I sat with the letter in my lap for a long time. Then I wrote her back. We began exchanging letters, like old pen pals. We shared our memories of our daughters, our husbands, and what it felt like to be betrayed, not just by strangers, but by the people we raised with our own two hands. One night, I showed Alice the letters. She sat beside me, quiet. "She sounds strong," she said after reading the third one. "She is. And she was almost destroyed by the same man you let into our home." Alice didn't defend herself. "Not anymore. I can't change what I did, Mom. But I can spend the rest of my life proving I'm not that woman anymore." I studied her. It wasn't just guilt in her eyes now, it was resolve. Grown, finally, from the ashes of consequence. Fall arrived like a whisper. The trees began to change outside, leaves curling into warm golds and rust-colored reds. I started spending more time in the garden again. I'd almost let it die after the betrayal, too angry to care, too hurt to water roots that seemed as broken as my heart. But now, I dug my hands back into the soil. It felt good, healing in its own small way. Alice joined me on Saturdays. We planted tulip bulbs, trimmed back the rose bushes. She never tried to lead, just followed my cues, handing me tools when I reached for them, holding the pot steady when I repotted the lilies. I didn't praise her. I didn't need to. One morning, I caught her outside by herself, kneeling by the tomato vines. She was pruning them gently, carefully, just like I used to do. And I realized then forgiveness doesn't come with fireworks. It grows like roots. Quiet, patient, steady. In November, we got the news that Bryce had accepted a plea deal. He'd spend 6 years in prison, barred from financial work for life. The district attorney praised the victims who came forward, especially the courageous testimony from the primary witness and her daughter, who cooperated fully. It was a small line in a bigger statement, but it meant the world. I printed it and pinned it on my fridge. Not to remember the man who tried to ruin me, but to remember that I didn't let him win, that I fought back, that we fought back. At the end of that same week, Alice stood in the doorway of my bedroom, twisting her fingers like she used to when she was a little girl with a scraped knee. "Mom," she said quietly, "would it be okay if I moved out? Just for a while?" I didn't look up from my book right away. When I did, I saw not rejection in her face, but humility and hope. "I think that's a good idea," I said. "I want to rebuild. From the ground up," she added. "Get my own place. Earn things the right way this time. But I'd still like to come by. Garden with you. Maybe have dinner on Sundays, if that's okay." I nodded slowly. "It's okay," I said. She smiled. Then, unexpectedly, she came forward and kissed the top of my head. "I love you, Mom." It was the first time she'd said it since the night everything broke. And somehow, it meant more than ever. After she left, I stood by the window and watched her drive off. The house was quiet again, not with tension, but with peace. I returned to my tea, to my book, to the life I had reclaimed piece by piece. And as I turned the next page, I thought of something Evelyn had written in her most recent letter. "We don't age into weakness. We age into clarity. And sometimes, clarity is the sharpest weapon of all." She was right. For a long time, I feared I was losing pieces of myself, my independence, my strength, my worth. But what I really lost was the illusion that silence kept things safe. Now I speak. Now I act. Now I live. A few months passed. Alice moved into a modest apartment across town. Nothing fancy, a one-bedroom on the second floor of a weathered brick building near the bus line. She said it reminded her of her first place after college. I think she liked the idea of starting over from the bottom, on her own terms. We kept our Sunday dinners. At first, it was awkward. Conversation stumbled between bites of roast chicken and boiled carrots. We avoided certain topics. The past lingered in the room like smoke. But little by little, that smoke cleared. She started bringing dessert her own baking. Sometimes it was a little dry, sometimes too sweet. But I always finished it. She always asked how my day was. I always answered honestly. Forgiveness doesn't arrive like a trumpet blast. It tiptoes in cautious, uncertain, and takes root in the smallest of gestures. One night, after dinner, she stayed late. The house was warm, filled with the soft ticking of that familiar kitchen clock and the low hum of an old jazz tune on the radio. "I've been thinking," she said, sipping her tea, "about what I let happen." I looked up. "I don't think I'll ever forgive myself," she said quietly. "You don't have to," I replied. "You just have to live better." She looked at me. Her eyes were no longer burdened by guilt alone, but something deeper. Understanding. "I want to speak," she said. "Publicly. About what happened. About elder abuse. About how easily people like Bryce can manipulate families." I was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded. "I want to own it. Use it. Maybe help someone else catch it before it's too late." That was the first time I saw pride in her again. Not mine, hers. The good kind. The kind that says I know I did wrong, and I'm going to make it right. In March, she gave a talk at the local community center. I sat in the front row, hands clasped tightly in my lap. She spoke with a shaky voice at first, but her words carried weight. She didn't spare herself. She told the truth about how manipulation doesn't always come from strangers, how shame keeps people quiet, and how easy it is to confuse desperation with justification. People cried. People clapped. When it was over, an older man came up to her and said, "My son's been asking about my will." I didn't think much of it until tonight. Alice nodded, gently. "It's okay to ask questions. And it's okay to say no." She turned to me afterward and whispered, "That felt good." I smiled. Helping others always does. In April, I started volunteering again, this time at a senior resource line. Twice a week, I answered calls from other elderly folks, many of whom were scared. Scared of scams, of being forgotten, of being too trusting. I told them they weren't alone. I told them their instincts mattered. And sometimes I just listened. One woman cried for 20 minutes straight because her son had started hiding her mail. Another said her granddaughter was pressuring her to sign over her bank accounts, just in case something happens. I didn't give legal advice, but I gave something just as powerful: validation. And when they hung up, they didn't sound so small anymore. Summer came. Alice helped me repaint the kitchen. We chose soft yellow, something bright, something new. It covered the stains on the walls. Not erased, just painted over. Like memory, like forgiveness. One Sunday, as we wiped down the counters together, she asked, "Do you still think about it? That day I betrayed you." I paused, wiping a bit of paint off my hand. "I do," I said, "but not the way you think." She looked at me, confused. "I think about how close I came to letting you go," I continued. "How close I came to packing my suitcase and never looking back. And how much we both would have lost." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she placed her hand on mine. "I'm glad you came back for your passport." I nodded. "So am I." On the 1-year anniversary of that day, Alice brought me a gift. It was a photo frame inside, a printed version of the headline from the local paper about Bryce's sentencing. Underneath it, she'd added a caption: "The day we stopped being silent." I hung it on the wall near the sunroom, where the morning light always hit. Sometimes I catch Alice standing there, just looking at it. Not proud of what she did, but proud of what she became after. One afternoon, as I sat in the garden pruning roses, my neighbor, Ruth, walked by. She leaned on her cane and smiled. "You're looking strong these days, Margaret." "I feel strong," I replied. She nodded. "Not everyone comes back from what you went through. Some of us just fade." I looked down at the dirt on my gloves, the scent of the earth rising up around me. "I didn't come back the same," I said, "but I came back better." And I meant it. Now, every time I step into the sunroom, I see the photo on the wall. I see the kitchen, freshly painted. I see Alice pulling up in her little red car on Sundays, arms full of groceries or flowers, or that too sweet pie she refuses to stop baking. I see my life not untouched by betrayal, not free from pain, but reclaimed. Piece by piece, word by word, day by day. And every so often, When the wind rattles the branches outside or the house creaks in its old bones, I remember that first moment. That accidental return. That overheard betrayal. And I smile not because it didn't hurt, but because I'm still here. And because I fought for myself even when the world told me I was too old to matter. Because I do. We all do.